That's in Moses now. Tiger beat by the checkout line, hope and print a love in time. Every quiz, every sigh, do you love him, yes or why? She made fantasy feel true, like the dream was meant for you. Hey, pin it up, tape it down. Love lives here, love lives now. MEOW, MEOW, shout it out right now. MEOW, MEOW, hear the whole world shout. Donny's grin, Davy's eyes, David's smile electrifies. She showed us how, somehow. MEOW, that's in Moses now. Who gave us dreams? And Moses! Who made it fun? And Moses! MEOW, MEOW, shout it out right now. MEOW, MEOW, spin the world around. Paper hearts, radio sound, teenage hope was never wrong. She made fantasy feel proud. MEOW, that's in Moses now.
This is Lori Rayfelt with God, Aliens, and a Cup of Coffee. Today we're going to be talking about more on the cup of coffee side of life, because that's the way we roll. Today I'm joined by a woman who shaped the dreams of generations, the wonderful Ann Moses. Ann was the editor of Tiger Beat magazine during the golden age of teen idols, when the Monkees, David Cassidy, Bobby Sherman, and oh my God, Donny Osmond filled our hearts and our bedroom walls. I grew up in Smithtown, Long Island, and when I was about 11 years old, Tiger Beat was everything to me. And I'm talking from my heart here. After church on Sundays, the only stores open was a little stationery store and the bakery next door. My mom would go into the stationery store and buy New York Times, Daily News, and Newsday, and there I'd be pleading for the latest issue of Tiger Beat, and she would buy it for me. I was absolutely infatuated with Donny Osmond, and Ann's magazine gave me the stories and photos that made the world come alive. She didn't just report on pop stars, she opened the window for millions of young fans, me, to feel part of something bigger and more magical. And what's so moving about Ann's story is how it came full circle. Decades later, at one of Donny's shows, Ann went to see the man who had once been the wide-eyed boy turning 14. When Donny first saw her, he didn't recognize her right away, although she looked the same. Just another face in the crowd, until she gently reminded him of the time he'd celebrated his 14th birthday at her home. You could see it in his eyes, the flicker of memory as he's going through trying to find Rita mackerel, right? Sparking back to life. Then it hit him. "And Moses," he said, instantly pulling her into a huge, heartfelt hug. It was as if time folded in on itself, and the teen idol and the editor who helped introduce him to the world reunited in pure joy. I really loved that. I loved it so much. Watching that moment unfold, you couldn't help but feel that Donny was just as stunned and grateful as every fan who had ever flipped through those glossy pages. Ann's new book captures the spirit beautifully, the humor, the heart, and the long, winding journey of a woman who lived at the center of pop culture history and came out the other side with grace and wisdom. So pour yourself a cup of coffee, settle in, and join me as we talk with Ann Moses about, go ahead, Donna.
Meow.
Those unforgettable Tiger Beat years and the full circle magic of a life that connected us through music, stories, and little teenage stardust. So, Ann, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So what did you think? Did I hit all the points in my?
Thank you very much.
Oh,
That's how you recounted my reunion with Donny. That hit all the right points.
oh my God, that was so wonderful. We tend to do this more conversational. So how did it all begin?
Well, I guess you could say it began in junior high. I started to write. We had a weekly teen page in the Anaheim Bulletin. I grew up 2 miles from Disneyland. And so they had reporters from different schools. So I would write about, somebody who had done well in sports or somebody who had won a science award. And I wrote as long of stories as I could because I was paid 15 cents an inch. That was when I learned to draw things out. Then, in high school, I was involved with a yearbook. I was sports editor in my junior year and editor in my senior year. And then when I started at junior college, I kind of went the newspaper route. So by my second year, I was co-editor of the Fullerton Hornet. So there was Fullerton Junior High. Now it's, Fullerton Community College. I knew I wanted to be involved in journalism. So then I was working at Disneyland. I started in 1962, and I was the lead counter girl at Sunkissed, I Presume, in Adventureland, right across the street from the Jungle Cruise. And I mean, working line, you just can't get more fun than that as a teenager. It is the coolest place. And, other members of the cast would come up and they'd say, "Hey, there's a Matterhorn party tonight," meaning the Matterhorn employees were going to have a party at such and such a place. And I didn't go to many of those, but, it was a really cool atmosphere. So one morning I had opened early and it was 7 in the morning. And because I think the park opened at 8 in the summer. And I saw a group of people across the street at the Jungle Cruise. And as they approached me, I saw that it was my supervisor and some other supervisors and Walt Disney. So Walt walked up and, I managed to say, "Would you like some orange juice?" And he said, "Yes, please." And, I said, "Large or small?" And I served him his orange juice. And while he was standing there, I was really taken aback because, it was Walt Disney. And but I kind of blurted out, "I've written 2 articles for the employee newsletter." And he said, "Oh, you're a writer." And I said, "Well, I'd like to be." And so as he was leaving, he said, "Well, Anne, keep it up. You never know where that's going to take you." That's just embedded in my brain. It was just the coolest thing. And it wasn't at the time, but later on, it kind of felt like he was sprinkling fairy dust over me, and putting the magic spell on, because it was later that summer. I was also working as a volunteer at a theater in the Round across the street from Disneyland called Melodyland Theater, because I had grown up just loving Broadway musicals, and they were putting on Annie Get Your Gun, My Fair Lady, all these wonderful shows. And as an usher, you could, seat people. And then if you wanted to stay and see the show, you could take an empty seat or stand in back. And so I saw, so many of these wonderful shows so many times. But this night I went to work and I hadn't paid attention to who was there or anything else. And when I get there, I realize that the headliners are the Dave Clark Five. British guys, the group that came along right after the Beatles. And in high school, we all went crazy when they put a picture of the Beatles in Life magazine. It was like, oh my gosh. So there was also a couple other small bands on the show, and there was kind of a little known duo named Sonny and Cher. that also were one of the opening acts. And once I saw their show, I mean, I just couldn't even believe it. They're in those, tight pants and that they dressed in suits, kind of like the Beatles. And oh my gosh, they were just so cute. And so the music was so amazing. And I just thought to myself, I have to meet these guys. That was how my brain worked. And so I could see that their tour manager, I had an idea he was standing right by me in the back watching. And I went up to him and I said, I'd really like an interview. I've been assigned to do an interview for my college paper, which wasn't true, but and he said, so their manager just said, there's not time. And after some pleading, he said, well, I tell you what, they're going to have dinner. And if you come back, before the next show, you can have 5 minutes with him. And I said, that's great. That's great. So, of course, I raced home, put on something besides my usher uniform and a black skirt, and, screamed at my mom, I'm going to interview the Dave Clark Five. And I went racing out the door and back to Melodyland. He had written me a note that said, please let this young lady in the stage door. It wasn't like current days where they had, all kinds of security and the big lanyards hanging around the neck and all that for backstage passes. It was just, very casual because they had no idea what was ahead. And so finally he said, okay, you can go in for a few minutes, but they're just finishing their dinner and I can't let you stay in there too long. I said, that's fine. So I go in and they were all so sweet. It was like, hi, they were introducing themselves. It was like, hi, I'm Dave. Hi, I'm Mike.
It's okay. We'll be
It was just like, oh my goodness. So I sat down. I had taken my tape recorder. I sat down. I interviewed Mike first. Then, they were all like hanging over his shoulder, listening to me interview him. And then I kind of took turns talking to each of them. Well, my 5 minutes turned into a half an hour. And it really was, it was so cool. Little did I know at the time that I would become friends with, the Dave Clark Five and their tour manager. And so that started it off. So I wrote a paper for the entertainment page as a place to print my story. And the reaction I got from my college colleagues was, they're just a teeny bopper act. Why don't you write about a real musician like Bob Dylan? And they were literally putting me down. And it was like, well, I don't really care what you think. I had a good time. As a result of that, I got a call from a young woman in Fullerton, and she and her mother were producing a weekly music newspaper called Rhythm and News. And they called me up and they said, would you like to do some stories for us? Of course, there was no pay involved, but I could care less. So they began, this was interesting. It was an interesting twist on my way to Teen Idols, because they felt like their newspaper was mostly about rhythm and blues, not so much about pop music. And they started sending me up to the black nightclubs, where the black performers were in South Los Angeles. And as a result, I saw James Brown in these little club settings. I mean, 100 people max. And here I am watching Ike and Tina Turner and, the Olympics and, James Brown. And I had asked James Brown after his show if I could interview him. And he said, well, is there any way you could come tomorrow and interview me? Because, tonight's, I'm tired. And I said, absolutely. So on a Sunday, I drive up to Los Angeles and go to his hotel room, he's in the Continental, which is where a lot of the artists stayed. But surprisingly, at that time, the black entertainers, they couldn't stage us anywhere. But in Hollywood, the Continental welcomed them. And so I go up to his room, the door, and his hair in these giant rollers because, he had kind of a swept back bouffant hairstyle at the time. And his hairdresser was there. He was sitting in like a barber chair, and he was putting the rollers in and getting ready for his next show. What a sweet man. He answered my questions. It was just, I couldn't even believe it. The thing with the black entertainment I found was they were so hungry to actually have press coverage because nobody was going to their shows, nobody was covering it. And here I am, and so they were just so welcoming to me. And sadly I did not get a picture with James, and he did sign a picture on the back, and I have that, and it's a very sweet little message. And so in the course of doing that, there were a couple of other times that they said, we need you to go up to Hollywood and interview so and so. So one of the times it was Peter Noon, Herman's Hermits. Peter's just, I think he's like 6 months or so younger than I am. We were all, 18 years old and just, young, having fun. And it was really cool. So we went up to the house where they were staying in Hollywood, and I went with this other girl, and we just had a blast. I interviewed them all, but it was all so casual. They were sitting around. They were getting a kick out of being interviewed. I went for a ride on the motorbike with Peter, and it was so sweet. That night, the other girl I was with, and I can't remember her name, I have a picture of her, but I can't remember her name. And she said to me, "Wouldn't it be great to work for Tiger Beat and get paid?" And I said, "What's Tiger Beat?" I mean, I was a college student. I was not a young teenager or a pre-teenager, and it's like I had never seen these magazines like 16. And she said, "Oh, it's a magazine all about the, pop stars." And I said, "Oh, that's really interesting." So in the course of doing these interviews, I had met Derek Taylor in Hollywood. And Derek used to be the Beatles publicist, and he had brought his whole family over to start his own business, PR business, and his roster of clients included Paul Revere and the Raiders and the Byrds and the Beach Boys. And so he would ask me, he said, "Would you do a story on the Beach Boys?" And it was like, sure, no problem. And one of my rules that I set for myself is that after I did a story, I always made sure their manager or their publicist or whoever was, their people, I made sure they got a copy, because I thought, how's Derek going to get a copy of this little newspaper that sold for 5 cents in the music stores on Fridays? And so I was up there. I had taken him the story I'd done on the Beach Boys, and I said, "Derek," I said, "do you know the people at Tiger Beat?" And he said, "Yeah, I write a monthly column." And I said, I hadn't noticed that. And I said, "Well, I'd really like just the opportunity if you could make it so I could introduce myself to them." Because I thought maybe they'll let me write a story. And I figured after I left that he'd make a call, at his convenience. But no, he picked up the phone while I'm sitting there, and he called up and he said, "Hi, Ralph." And of course, Ralph was the editorial director. And he said, "I've got Ann Moses here, and she'd like to meet you. She's a really good writer." I'm going, way to go, Derek. And he said, he was like 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. His office was on Sunset Boulevard. And he said, "Can you be over there at 4?" And I said, "Of course." And I'm driving over there and I'm thinking, I don't have a resume. I don't, I didn't know this was going to happen. But I go up to the office and I sit down with Ralph, and he just says, "Tell me about yourself." So I did. And I told him how I'd interviewed the Dave Clark Five and James Brown and Tina Turner and Peter Noon, who was being, he was in Tiger Beat at the time. And, they had only started publishing in September of 65, and this was December of 65. So he said, well, I tell you what, why don't you take some of the interviews you've done, write a couple of them up in Tiger Beat style, and then bring them back to me when you're done, and we'll see, if we want to publish one of them. So, of course, I madly went home, worked all weekend, pouring through the Tiger Beat, trying to figure out what is Tiger Beat style. And what I came up with is they love the little details, every little detail. Where I would usually write a general introduction, and then I'd have all the serious questions I had asked. Well, they wanted more details, and they also used a million exclamation points. I think that's one of the main criteria of Tiger Beat is we used exclamation points, like they were mandatory on every sentence, and emphasis. So I drive back up after my classes on Monday. I drive back up. I said, "Here are my articles," and he read them right while I was there. And instead of saying, "Well, we'd like to publish one," and he goes, "How would you like to come to work part-time?" And it was like, okay. And he said, "Let's do an internship." And so I was like, he said, "If you could come up, 20 hours a week," because he knew I was in school. And I said, "Absolutely," because I only had classes, I think, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I didn't have classes on Tuesday and Thursday. And I said, "Absolutely." And what I didn't even know when I accepted this is that they were paying me. And it was like, does life get better than this? How could it possibly be cooler than this? So once I went up after school, they started sending me out on assignments. One of the early ones was to go and interview Dino, Desi, and Billy. And that was the day I got to meet Dean Martin. It was at Dino's house. And here I am, their manager let me in. And then he said, go wait in this little, sitting room off the front door. And in walks Dean Martin in this gorgeous, like, cashmere sweater and said, "Anne, would you like?" And I mean, Dean Martin asked if you want a drink. It was just too funny for words. And I said, "I'd love a Coke." And so then by this time, the guys are ready to go. We filmed a photo essay of 24 hours with Dino, Desi, and Billy. And I asked them what they did each hour. And then our photographer took these pictures of them, Dino in his bed with a nightcap on and all these, and then Desi and Billy hitting him with pillows. I mean, it was silly, but it was fun. And, I also got to know their manager very well. So, I mean, it was one thing after another. Next thing they'd send me out on was when Paul Revere and the Raiders were filming Where the Action Is at the Los Angeles Zoo. So here I am, meeting the Raiders, and they are all, they acted in real life just like they do on stage, silly, joking, having fun together, while they're making cool music. And it just, I just couldn't even believe it. So by that summer, I had been accepted at San Jose State College, and I was going to get my journalism degree, the final 2 years. Well, just about that time, they sent me on tour with Paul Revere and the Raiders and Dino, Desi, and Billy for a week. Mm-hmm. Even though I made the arrangements for me to stay in the dorm and everything was set, I had met with the head of the journalism department. It was like, I can't leave this. Already, I just saw that I was having these experiences that, could never be duplicated. And it's like, college can wait. And I ended up never finishing. But I got a different kind of education in business, to tell you the truth. I mean, I learned so much about business, and it just got better. I mean, by my first year, even though I didn't have a title, I was editing the magazine because they could see, that I understood printing and publishing because of my experience on the college newspaper, working with, the printers at the school and how it all worked, how photographs were made, to be reproduced, all those things. In fact, I got real sick in January of '67, and I was laid up for like 3 weeks. And I can remember that I got a call from the art director, and he said, "Anne, you've got to approve these layouts. Can I bring them over to your apartment and you can approve the layouts?" So, I mean, it didn't occur to me at the time that I was the one making those decisions on all the final pages, and it just seemed natural to me to be doing that. But, looking back, that was a pretty big deal that they had allowed me to do with very little supervision. That virus, whatever the heck I had, that
Yeah.
passed, and I was back at work every day. And but it got better and better, that summer. I think that was the summer that or was it might have been back in '66 that I went to Hawaii, but they also sent me to Hawaii with Dino, Dizzy, and Billy and the Beach Boys. And of course, the Beach Boys weren't really teen idols. They were really, they had made their mark on music, everybody played their music, but I wouldn't call them teen idols. And so I only concentrated on Dino, Dizzy, and Billy when we were in Hawaii. And I mean, it was incredible. We went all over the island. I took pictures. They went out boating. I took pictures. It was just, nothing could compare to that. So it just got better and better as it went along. That's the thing. It showed me that I was capable of doing these things, and I hadn't realized that the things I had learned prior, things I had learned at Disneyland University, because you have to go to Disneyland University for 3 days before you work at Disneyland. And I mean, the things I learned there about these are not customers, they're our guests. Once you come to your place of work, you are on stage. That was his thing. And you've got to be smiling. Sometimes my supervisor would come up and say, "Anne, where's your smile?" And it was like, "Oh, I was concentrating on whatever." And just the reminder, and then you were, that was part of the magic of Disneyland, was those rules that Walt set up, that it so much enhanced the visitor's experience. And I took everything I learned there and applied it throughout my life, to be honest. It was a great learning time, very much so. The minute I started working full time in June, then that was when I quit Disneyland, because I had worked a couple of grad nights. That's when they open the park and all the high school kids that are graduating come in, and then they close it and they don't leave till morning. And so you get paid triple time for a grad night. So I had worked a couple of those, but then they doubled my salary. So, I was making really excellent money compared to, a secretary that worked for some executive. I mean, I was making, my parents couldn't believe it, because I was almost making as much as my dad's salary, and he had been with the bank for 25 years. So it was, it, it was just, and then I got broadsided in my parents' car. When they bought a new car, they gave me their '54 Ford, and that's what I was cruising up to LA. Well, by that time I had moved up there, of course, and I got broadsided, and it was
Oh,
like, "Oh no, what am I going to do?" And the publisher just said, "Oh, well, we're going to give you a company car. Pick out any car you want." Honest to goodness, that's what they told me. Well, I had driven my parents' Pontiac Le Mans, and I said, I want a Pontiac Le Mans. I mean, it had air conditioning. I've never had a car with air conditioning. It had automatic windows. It was like a big deal. I could have said a Mercedes convertible because they were just leasing them. And it's like he meant his word. You can have any car you want, but I thought that was just great. So they just kept putting out these carrots, and I kept reaching for them because it's like every day it got better and better. And it was really, really cool.
It's like synchronicity and just like you said, whatever that energy is, it was just coming at you the whole time. I mean, I don't know, it's not quite you were in the right place at the right time, but you were definitely at the right time. And you kind of knew what they wanted. They would read what you were writing. I mean, because it did gravitate to people like me and Donna, like, yeah, we want more. So you definitely talent, it was a gift, and you ran with it.
Thank you. I did. But, once I was involved, it was easy to see what it was that we were trying to accomplish for the readers. I mean, even though I was still a teenager and in my early 20s, I understood what they wanted and why they wanted all those details because you wanted to know everything. You wanted to know if they had long eyelashes and what color eyes and, how did they laugh? And so once I realized that, it was so easy to include that in everything you wrote because it had a purpose and it was just fulfilling those needs. And that was really important to me. I wasn't trying to be an intellectual writer as I had, somewhat tried to be, a serious writer in college. It was, I'm writing the right thing at the right time. And I didn't think anything about it. And it was,
You were making it real. You were actually making it more almost tangible, as if you were, there was an opening. So, I mean, I could feel like I'm sitting talking to Donny Osmond because you would bring up these things and he would be doing everyday things. Like, I think when around your pot of chili, I think
yeah,
there was,
exactly. Exactly.
yeah,
But it was so effortless because all of the people I worked with a couple exceptions, were so amenable to what was going on. I mean, most of the monkeys, they knew this was what they had signed up for. Mike Nesmith, not so much. He did not like being interviewed. He thought teeny bopper shit was a waste of time. And, he would change his tune years later when he realized what they had in their heyday. But, then we had the perfect solution to the mic problem. And he just said, Anne, go talk to my wife. Ask her these questions. She'll tell you. Well, then I'd meet his beautiful, lovely wife, Phyllis, and we'd go to lunch in Beverly Hills like once a month. And I'd do, how they met, his life story, what their Christmas was like. She wasn't giving away family secrets, but she was just sharing, her life with me. And therefore, it gave so much insight into Mike without having to, twist Mike's arm. And it's like I could not have been happier when he first said that, talk to my wife. Well, that worked out so beautifully. And it was really fun. And she was so fun to be around. We were just about the same age, our lunches were always we got the business done, but it was casual, and then we were just two young women having lunch together, and that was
yeah.
made me really enjoy it. At the time, he wanted to be a serious musician, so I think he was having inner conflict about the fact that he had become a teen idol, that they were doing all this slapstick and crazy stuff in their show. And, he had a hit record with Linda Ronstadt's song of his. He really intended to be a serious musician. And I don't think he could come to terms with what was happening. And then later in his life, not only did he get into more of his own personal music and do his own musical thing, but then finally he realized what he was missing from the Monkey days. And then at that point he was touring with them in the East. I don't know if he was in the 90s. And I last saw him on stage, I think it was 2014. True to form, though, I kept asking their road manager, Andrew Sandoval, if I could interview Mike. I said, I haven't talked to him in 50 some years. And I ran into his Mickey's sister Coco, who was singing, backup with them. And of course, Coco and I had met and did all this stuff together during the heyday. And it was like, Coco, and we're hugging. And right as we're in this big bear hug, who sneaks out the door behind me but Mike Nesmith? And there's a picture of him sneaking out the door with us hugging. And I thought, well, there he was.
Well,
So he was true to form. I never got to even speak to him again, but that was okay. And then there was the time on the set of the movie Head. We were out at Columbia Ranch. They were doing this, crazy movie that they made.
yeah.
He said, "Ann, let's go to lunch." And I went, "Okay." And so we jump in his Jeep. He drives to the restaurant. We sit down. As I noted in my article, he had like 4 or 5 scotches over lunch. I don't think I had anything to drink. And what he basically told me is, he goes, "Do you know why I was, mean to you?" And he said, "Well, it's because I wanted you to be a more serious writer. I wanted you to write more about the details of the music and so on." And it was like, well, okay, Mike, you had your reason, I think it's kind of silly because I was a Tiger Beat editor. I was writing for our readers. And, me, I had my chance to write more serious pieces when I was doing my writing for the New Musical Express in the UK. And so I got to do serious interviews with some of the writers and some of the acts that were coming to town. So it's just I don't know, I think it's a funny moment that I found out why he was mean to me. But I really didn't care because I had those really nice experiences with Phyllis and I got the job done is the point. I got what I needed for the magazine in the process of that, and she sure made it easier. He and Peter both, I was so comfortable with them and they were so comfortable with me. And Davy was just nice all the time. He thought about other people. I was so happy to see him so successful. He was, happy with Linda. Of course, we didn't cover their marriage in real time. And I did not mind keeping secrets because it's like
Yeah.
we weren't the National Enquirer. We weren't there to say, "Oh, Davy and Linda are living together." Woo, It's like, hey, it was hippie days. It was free love. I didn't think twice about it just because of the atmosphere. And there was no way we were going to write anything bad about the Faves because it wouldn't do them any good and it wouldn't do Tiger Beat any good. If that's what Tiger Beat became known for, that would have not been a good thing. So, but he was absolutely wonderful to work with. And Peter, even more so. Peter just treated me with such seriousness that when I'd ask him questions, he would give me real answers, real detailed answers, and he wanted me to, he wanted to express his feelings to me and his beliefs, and it just it made for a great relationship.
Did you ever interview the Cowsills?
Oh, yes, and they were all so sweet.
Mhm.
Uh, it was really nice to be around them because kind of like the Osmonds, they were a big family. They teased one another. When one was being interviewed, the others would tease them or they'd make cracks about what they were answering and stuff. It was just great to be around, you know. Then when they moved to a house in the valley, and you know, and I'm going on the trampoline with Susie, and it just they were awesome. You know, I didn't really, I know I interviewed Minnie Mom, you know, the mom of the family one time. And she said the funniest thing about, well, you know, Susie doesn't have that good a voice, but, you know, we've got her in the group anyway. And it was like, did you really say that to me? You know, it was like, oh my gosh. And of course, you know, she's still performing to this day. And her voice is lovely, but for Mom to say that was like, holy smokes, you know.
Yeah.
I was internally I was quite shocked, and then I never really came into contact with the father, who I guess was the nucleus of all their problems.
I read several, I guess,
Did you watch
biographies.
the documentary, The Family?
Yeah. Yeah.
It is just heartbreaking.
Oh, yeah.
It is so hard to watch because they were talented kids. They just it was very hard. And
Oh,
to
yeah.
see the ones that have made it through and you know are making fans happy today,
Yeah.
it's really, you know, good for them, good for all the fans to be able to enjoy, you know, all their wonderful musics.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, John is now a drummer for the Beach Boys.
Yeah, yeah.
See, I have all this trivia stuff in my head, and it's like, why do I know that?
Don't we all? Don't we all?
But
Oh,
probably a lot of my trivia about Donny Osmond came from you. So there you go. You know, so if
okay.
I say
I'll
something, I'm
take it.
really reflecting it onto you. And I know so many people out there will definitely be saying, "Yeah, wow, you got to interview with Anne, and she's telling all these great stories, and this is so cool." And they're saying, "Well, how come you're not talking about Bobby Sherman yet?" You know, no.
Part
So
two.
there you go. Bobby Sherman was kind of I know he had a few songs. I thought he was really cute on that. What's it? The Brides. Here
Here
comes
come
the
the
Bride.
brides.
Yeah, yeah, and that was out in Seattle.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think.
Well, I mean, it was set in Seattle, you know.
Yeah,
It was a takeoff on Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, the movie,
kind
you
of. I
know.
don't know if the theme song was "The Bluest Skies You Ever Seen" or in Seattle.
Seattle.
I don't know.
Yep, you got it. That was the theme song.
I love that song, but when I went to Seattle, it was raining. I'm like, where are these blue skies? But oh, they're in Arizona. That's where they are. And then when you're in Arizona, you're like, where's the shade?
That's a hard commodity to come by here.
I know. So yeah, well, back to the that documentary with the councils.
Mhm.
The brother that started he was in it. He was the one playing the guitar at a tiny little bar. And then he's in between the songs, he would talk about we actually had a few hits, you know, and he would talk about, you know, back in the 60s. But he would show up in this I think it was like a Ford, you know, SUV, you know, kind of had some dents. It was sort of like how did they get from the stardom to, you know, you could tell they still loved playing music.
Mhm.
He was a twin. His brother was the naughty one that ended up going in the army. I'm trying to think because it was John. There
Well, I
was
can't keep track of all the names.
yeah,
I mean, I certainly could back in the day when I was spending time around them. That was easy.
there was that time with where he was talking to Shirley Jones about the Partridge Family and that they were planning on making this show about them.
Well, yes, it was their father that was negotiating with Screen Gems. They, you know,
Uh,
obviously they were the impetus for that storyline, a mother and her kids and, being a band. But
Yeah.
he insisted that the Cowsills be the band. And of course, Screen Gems did not want that. They didn't want, that many, they wanted a male star and a female star, and another, female that would really get the teens and preteens excited. And
Yeah.
it wouldn't have been the same if it had been the Cowsills.
Oh, yeah.
I wish they had gotten more of a benefit from providing the storyline, but I don't think it would have been the same show if it had been the Cowsills. And
Yeah.
they weren't trained actors. So I think Screen Gems did the right thing. It was a super hit show. And
Oh,
I think if there was some other negotiation that could have been had, but the father was adamant. Oh, and he was adamant that the star be, the female mother was his wife. And, I think they already had Shirley Jones signed at that point. So it was like, no, we can't do what you're asking. And so then the deal was off. So,
well, that's the way Hollywood works, right?
yes, it
You know,
is.
it's
But,
almost
they made the right choices.
yeah, yeah. And then while that was going on, I mean, at that point in your career, you must have had a lot of things going on. I mean, it must have been not just talking to one set of people, one group. You were now talking maybe every day, maybe to different people, different.
Yeah, not only were my days, I totally enjoyed the actual physical putting the magazine together, planning out each page, laying the ads down and the stories around them. I just love the organizational quality of that because I'm like a, closet Martha Stewart. But I was out, at least, once a week on the set of Here Come the Brides while Bobby was, what was our number one teen idol at that time, and out on the set of the Partridge Family when they were popular, and certainly spending time with the Osmonds. Once they hit about 1970, then I spent a lot of time with them, and that was always a pleasure. So I did have to divide up my time because in addition I was writing a weekly column called Hollywood Calling for the New Musical Express. So I had to write not only what was happening in Hollywood, but I always, when the British groups would come over, the Yardbirds or the Who, they wanted me to write about them back in the hometown newspaper, the New Musical Express. So they made a point to get in touch with me so that and then that would end up, they'd be in Tiger Beat and I'd get my extra paid stories every week. And then they paid me for if I did extra things, I did the Monkey's Life stories and things like that for NME. So I was so busy, but I mean, at that time in my life, I can't imagine any other pace. It fit me so much. Now, I'm not a night person, so it was with a little bit of effort that I would go to these record cocktail parties, or I'd have to go see somebody at the Trip. But it always turned out to be I'd have a blast. And so even though I might be reluctant because I'd rather just sit at home and relax and watch TV, I would go to the Trip and see, the Birds or, whoever, these different groups. And I'd always end up going, oh, I'm so glad I went. I'm so glad I went. It was a busy time, a
Oh my
really
goodness.
good busy.
Now, when you started doing interviews with the Osmonds, was it pretty much was mom and dad kind of nearby, or
Not really. They had put, I think, so much responsibility onto Alan as the group's leader
Mhm.
that they didn't have to look over their shoulders. They really didn't. And I think they trusted them. They had let them know what was probably taboo to talk about, or they intrinsically knew it because that's how they were raised.
Yeah.
They weren't, and it was always, and sometimes both parents would be around, and I got to know Olive Osmond, their mom, and she was so wonderful to me. I think I gained her trust early on when she'd see what I'd write about them. And I know there was one incident where Gloria Stavers, the editor of 16, had taken a topless picture of Donny. And, her captions are, she was a little bit salacious in how totally inappropriate. And I mean, I knew enough about Mormons that I knew that they wore garments, that they were modest, and it's like respecting those things that were important to
Yeah.
their lives. I didn't lose anything by not
Yeah.
taking a topless photo of Donnie or writing salacious headlines. We would get about as racy as, it, the what it's like to kiss Donnie, or it would be regarding a kiss, and that was about it.
Yeah.
Or what it's like to marry Donnie, or the girl that Donnie's looking for. We never got into the you know
Did you guys, or was it yeah, was it 16 magazine about the win a dream date with Donnie? Was that you guys, or was
no,
that
we didn't have a dream date. We had spent a week with the Osmond family. We gave away locks of Donnie's hair after I went to a haircut. And I wish I could find someone that has a lock of his hair that we sent, because we really sent him out. When we ran a contest, we did whatever it was. And so I just love for somebody to contact me and say, I still have my baggie with Donnie's a lock of his hair.
Wow, that's incredible. I know when I saw that contest, it must have been 16 magazine or whatever, and I sat there at my desk, and I was thinking, dear Donnie, and that's about as far as I got, because it was like I was just a kid. I'm like, what was it that I would really want to do? And I'm thinking to myself, I would just like to be his friend. It was just kind of like that. Maybe hold his hand.
Because you were innocent at that young, and so many of our readers were. That's why it never occurred to me to put any of this older stuff in, which you would find elsewhere. It's just,
Yeah.
come on. When I used to listen to songs in 6th grade, and they said, I'm going to make love to you, well, I thought that means I'm going to kiss you.
Yeah, with a really big hug.
My mom didn't give me the talk for a few years yet. And it's like, so I didn't know what they were really saying in the lyrics. But it's like, there's no reason to lose that innocence early. I mean, certainly kids do today, and I'm not sure it's the best thing. I like the way, we came of age, and it was certainly right for the time. And
Yeah, I definitely do too. And then on he was at Donny Osmond's birthday celebration, 14th birthday celebration.
yes, we had that at my house in Hollywood. By then, I was living in this amazing apartment. It was built by Cecil B. DeMille as an investment, this apartment building for his niece. And it was built in the Spanish style. I mean, I had like 16-foot ceilings, woods on the ceilings with beams, step up to the dining room with wrought iron, wood floors. I mean, it was just exquisite. It was a 2-bedroom apartment. It was just amazing. A beautiful fireplace, because there's a picture of Donnie sitting in front of my fireplace at that party, and the fire is roaring. And I thought, how did he stay there long enough even to get this picture? It was a roaring fire, but it's a great shot. Yes, so we just and it just turned out so wonderfully. It was really, really cool. And of course, I arranged it all with Mrs. Osmond, because you didn't do anything without her okay. And she was very, very business savvy. as was the father, but it's like, I don't think she got enough credit for just how savvy she was about their career. She was very involved and,
Yeah.
never cutthroat. She was just, she kept to her values, but she was also firm on what they would and wouldn't do. And once she gave you the okay, then you were good.
Yeah, yeah, and it sound like they all had a lot of fun, yet I just kinda wonder how at that point, maybe Donnie didn't really process it about, I'm in this vortex of being this I'm under the magnifying glass of all these young girls. I mean, he might have loved it, or he might have after a while compartmentalized it because in some ways he wasn't
No,
it's
I think
being adored from a distance.
I think he really enjoyed it at the time. And he enjoyed it on behalf of his brothers that he was with them. In fact, I asked him a question when we had our reunion, and I said the second time when we had a special Tiger Beat VIP together before his show, and it was really great. But I asked him a question, and it was, what did you think when you saw your face on the cover of Tiger Beat for the first time? And he said, well, I was embarrassed. He goes, where are my brothers? Why are you just putting my picture on the cover? And he said, we were a team, we were a group, but he got over that. And uh, they all embraced it as well. That what was good for one Osmond is good for all Osmonds, and so that was never an area of contention between them. When he was older, like in, I would say, the East, when he was having some troubles getting work and those things, he went through a period of time where he kind of cursed, but not really cursed, that his teeny bopper idol, which he felt he could not shake. And of course, everything has changed today. All the fans from back then come to see him in Vegas, and he gives them his time at the VIPs. His show is very intimate and very oriented to the audience. The audience gets to shout out requests, from one of his 65 albums and see if they can stump him if he's forgotten the lyrics. And it's just, he came to realize what an important part of his life all that fan adulation provided. Now he is giving back, just and and just embracing that adulation and that appreciation for his work. But when he was struggling, you can understand that he would blame it on, nobody wants to touch Donny Osmond because he was that teeny bopper idol, and he wanted to be taken more seriously as he got to be a grown man.
Yeah, I think it was when the Donnie and Marie show got out, and they were starting to do a lot of really, sick were, like, way silly, skits that he would always be the brunt of the joke.
Yeah.
I kinda think that didn't help, but I think before that,
But
I
I
don't
think he
know.
knew it. They knew exactly what they were doing. They knew that that's what was making the show a hit, kind of like Sonny and Cher. It's like
Yes.
Sonny was always the butt of the joke, but it was the two of them sharing the stage. And so I don't think he had any problem with that at all.
How did you approach Marie Osmond? Because she would write those articles in Tiger Beat.
Right. Well, I mean, she was always around when we'd visit the house. If we take the contest winner over to meet the entire family for the girl that win a week with the Osmonds, well, the whole family was there. And not only did she get to meet the whole family, but she got to meet both grandmothers and both older brothers. So she
Uh,
literally got to meet the entire family, and it was really cool. But Marie was always around, and she was just this cute little girl, and she wasn't singing with them yet. And so then we approached Olive about Marie writing a column, and she was all for it. So it just opened another channel to be on the inside of the Osmonds' lives. And we knew she wasn't going to write anything that, and I'm sure her mom worked with her on it because Olive was, she had been a teacher and she was very skilled
Yeah.
at, in fact, I commented to Donny when I was interviewing him earlier this year, and it was like, you guys spoke such good English. You wrote good English. And he goes, that's because at breakfast it was like, okay, today we're going to learn how to diagram a sentence or whatever it was.
Wow.
Every day she was teaching them, in addition to whatever their studies were, she would start the day with writing on a chalkboard and saying, we're going to learn about this or that today. And so they all, they speak and write the English language, the way we learned to back in my day, which is,
Yeah.
I'm a little older than most of the Osmonds, but it's just like, it was really good to see that they were educationally really well rounded and not just which was not the same like when I went to interview the Jackson 5. Now, they were really nice kids, and I asked them, we had them fill out little questionnaires, what's your favorite color? Because we like to have them do that in their own handwriting so that the readers would know these are their answers. These aren't made up. These aren't what I taped in an interview. And Michael got to about the third question. Jermaine had to take over for him. And I could tell by the way they talked that they were very undereducated. They weren't illiterate,
No.
but they were undereducated because in that household, Joe was the taskmaster, and all that mattered was them rehearsing and practicing and, being successful with their music. And he didn't give a hoot about education. And it
Yeah.
really showed. And I felt bad for them. And I told
Yeah.
Donnie that story, and he just said, I had no idea. And, Michael seemed to be more comfortable speaking as he got older. Boy, when, I think he was around 5 or 6 at the time, maybe. I can't remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
Joe just didn't care about their education.
Yeah. Yeah. I just, yeah, he was kind of, again, it's sort of like the father with the cow sills, heavy-handed
Yes. Yeah, very
and
much so.
and in the sense of, you should be really taking care of these kids because what they're producing and what they're bringing back to the family is you should be cherishing them. I mean, I'm not putting them on a pedestal because they are your kids, but I kind of like the idea that
Yeah, but
that
respecting them. I don't think the Cowsills' father respected those kids, and they deserved respect for everything they did.
Yeah. I remember seeing that show. The lead star on Beverly Hillbillies was doing one of those specials, and he had the cowsills on it. It was just the whole show was with the cowsills on it,
Mhm.
and it was just really, really fascinating seeing the kids how they were talking to mom and what they were doing. They had little skits in between,
Mhm.
and then they were singing that song about it was the song that the oldest Cowsill didn't like. It was I think one of the last songs that they had just done the I love the flower child, and
Oh,
then
yeah.
they did hair, and that was incredible.
Yes.
And
Yeah, I love their version of hair.
yeah. Yeah, but there
Awesome.
was one song they did that dad said, you're gonna record this," and the oldest looked at it and said, "This is," the oldest of the band part said, "This is crap." This is, but he still made them make the song. But
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, he threw away a lot of opportunities for them.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think the same could have happened. I think it turned out that Michael was very business savvy to get and to do what he did with, especially with when Thriller came out.
Mhm.
And And at that time, it was funny in the early 80s, I was kind of worried about Donnie because he just completely, like you said, he completely disappeared. And sometimes he'd show up
That's
on
because,
TV.
and not for lack of trying,
Yeah.
that's the thing. He got turned down so many times. Oh no, you're only known as that teeny bopper star. And he got turned down for all kinds of things. The really big turnaround came when Andrew Lloyd Webber asked him to do Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
Yeah.
Even though he was doing that up in Canada, it really turned his life around. And
Yeah.
he was able to build off of that to bring back his solo career.
Mhm.
Now he's been named the best entertainer in Las Vegas, I think 3 years in a row. And when you see his show, you understand why.
Yeah.
The versatility, it's
Mhm.
just your heart is full, like when you were a kid at a concert when you're
Mhm.
watching him. Those same feelings are there, even though you're seeing this man in his 60s. It just doesn't matter, and the way he moves, you're going, he's not that old. He can't be, because
Yeah.
he's still got it, I'm telling you.
Yeah. Yeah. He's amazing. I hope one day to get to go to his concert. Just haven't found the time yet.
Yes, yes, he does. He does tour, periodically. Now, since his brother Wayne passed away, he has always valued his family life. That has been number one to him his whole life. But he realizes he can't go 24/7 and be away from his kids and grandkids. And I don't know, he doesn't have any great grandchildren yet, but they'll be coming along. And it's like he really realized. And so, like, this summer he didn't tour. He took the summer off. He built a vegetable garden, and just he was just a homebody for the whole summer. And I think he needs that recharge now to then go back to Vase, because his performance, I mean, my husband went with me, my best friend Robert went with me when we saw him a year ago, and they just said, we can't believe his show, it is so good. And he just, we went to his dressing room after the show and we just said, how do you do it? And, you must be exhausted. And he said, well, I go home and get a pretty good night's sleep after. It's just, I think because he is getting so much back, it's a more intimate setting in the showroom rather than a huge concert hall. And so the audience just gets the ultimate experience at that show.
Yeah. Yeah. He's I've watched a lot of videos of him and what he's doing, or if he's going on those boat trips and he's doing his new rendition of Yo-Yo and whatnot. And
Mhm.
I just get a kick out of it.
Yeah.
I love seeing the old Yo-Yo up on the, from with I mean, all these memories keep pouring back. It was
Exactly. Exactly.
every Sunday when I got my Tiger Beat magazine and mom got the newspapers, I would always look to see if the Osmonds were going to be in concert. For me, it would have been Nassau Coliseum or Madison Square Garden. And particular time, I think
And
it
then they
was
did appear at Madison Square Garden. I think it was in 72.
73.
Was it?
73. Because let me see, I was just started ninth grade, and maybe it was 72. I think it was 73. But I saw he was playing. It's 72, and I stand corrected. But like November, it was October, November timeframe, and my sister and I went. Donna and I went, and we got there, and Madison Square Garden at the time it was ridiculously big, and we were up pretty high. But I just remember, since all of a sudden these girls are screaming, 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 screaming. I think it kind of gave me almost a panic attack. Like,
Yeah.
why are they all screaming? Do they?
Well, and it makes it hard to hear. That's what's nice about the Vegas show is that nobody's screaming. Everybody's Your
Yeah.
heart is racing, and it's just like when you were, a teenager, but
Yeah.
they're not screaming.
Well, there you go. That really it's funny though how you don't have that expectation. Like I had seen Billy Joel in concert in 1980,
Mhm,
and it was in England, and I was stationed there. That was
mhm.
my work assignment. I was over in England. So when it started, the audience was very polite. They would sit, he'd be playing and they would clap at the end, and it was just kind of interesting. But I think he was unnerved by it because he wasn't getting any feedback from the audience.
I don't know. With Billy Joel, it's not like he wasn't the screamer type. I mean, he wasn't like a teen idol. He was an artist that was adored for his music. And it
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
that he was this cute guy
Mhm.
dancing on the stage. So I'm not sure you can compare the two. I know when I saw the Beatles at Hollywood Bowl, everybody was screaming.
Yeah, yeah, which is
It was
crazy.
what you
Well,
did in those days.
yeah. So I was wondering, would it be possible that we could do a part two?
I think we can. Let's put it off a little ways. Maybe January, only because Tony's having a knee replacement year. That went out. You can edit that part.
But it was just so wonderful. I mean, I could listen to you all day, and I know
Oh,
you like.
thank you so much.
I got a life to live.
All
Well,
right, great
and this
talking with you.
and this is God Aliens in a Cup of Coffee with Ann Moses. I love you. I know my sister loves you, and you just rock and roll.
Na 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 na. Saturday candy store, spinning racks and hearts galore. Magazine dreams glued on smiles, counting love and teenage miles, paper stars and transistor tunes. Fell in love every afternoon. Hey, who's your crush? Don't be shy. Circle one, give it a try. MEOW, MEOW, shout it out right now. MEOW, MEOW, hear the whole world shout. Donny laughs, Davy sings, David Cassidy makes hearts swing. From the cover then to now. MEOW, that's in Moses now. Tiger beat by the checkout line, hoping print a love in time. Every quiz, every sigh, do you love him, yes or why? She made fantasy feel true, like the dream was meant for you. Hey, pin it up, tape it down. Love lives here, love lives now. MEOW, MEOW, shout it out right now. MEOW, MEOW, hear the whole world shout. Donny's grin, Davy's eyes, David's smile electrifies. She showed us how, somehow. MEOW, that's in Moses now. Na, 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 na. Hey, hey, don't grow up, not today. If believing feels too loud, that's exactly what she allowed. Who gave us dreams? And Moses! Who made it fun? And Moses!